Hello and welcome to Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ian Averill, and tonight we're talking about Nosferatu.
So this is going to be interesting because it's a part 2 to a previous episode that you were not part of.
Yeah.
Way back in episode 54, Ari and I did an episode about Dracula. It was our Halloween episode in 2019. We talked a lot about the book and all the other adaptations and also both of the other Nosferatus. I'll just say this. I'd recommend if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to the first one first. In fact, Ian, you recently re-listened to it, didn't you?
I did. Yep. I wanted to refresh myself on your opinions of 2 different Nosferatus.
We got to talk about the new Nosferatu, but in order to talk about the new Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers movie that is out in theaters literally right now, everyone seems to have an opinion about the mustache. We'll get to the mustache in a second. But in order to talk about this one, we need to talk about the 2 previous Nosferatus. The 1922 Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, directed by F.W. Murnau, and Nosferatu the Vampire, the 1979 movie that Werner Herzog wrote and directed. But in order to talk about those, we have to talk about Dracula. It's a book written by Bram Stoker, 1897. You better know it at this point. Guy goes to Castle Dracula, and there's a vampire there. And he's like, I'm not a vampire. And he's like, but you seem like a vampire. And he's like, I am a vampire. The book is super fun and super scary. Dracula is incredibly compelling, but is a monster. This was our big thing from that episode, is that we did not find the Dracula in the book sexy at all.
Yeah.
We kind of hate sexy Dracula. And as we were going through all the different versions of Dracula, the thing that kept coming up was if they tried to make Dracula sexy, we tended to rebel against that a little bit. And then in more of a story sense, we found that there were too many characters who were often underdefined. And we thought that was why so many adaptations play fast and loose with the story. Because, for example, here are 2 women who are in the original. There's Mina and there's Lucy. Sometimes they would switch their names. Sometimes they'd combine them and call them Lucy. Sometimes they'd combine them and call them Mina.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All the adaptations play super fast and loose with the book. Our opinion was the reason that happens is because the characters are not super well defined. Then there's Nosferatu, 1922, and Nosferatu, 1979. And when we did the original episode, we talked about them in a very specific order, starting from the least scary going up to the most scary. And the second scariest version we watched was the silent Nosferatu, and the scariest one we watched was the 1979 Werner Herzog Nosferatu. Also, those were our 2 favorites. Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, is this landmark movie in the history of cinema. Beautiful and terrifying, and Max Schreck as Count Orlok. Wait, Count Orlok? Yes, they changed all the names because they thought they could get away with copying Dracula, which was still under copyright, just by changing the character names. They could not. They did in fact get yelled at, and they were ordered to destroy every version of it by Bram Stoker's his widow won a suit against them. But then in 1979, when Werner Herzog was going back to remake it, I felt like they made a good choice, an honest choice, which was just to change all of the names back to the names from the book. So he's not Orlok in this one. He's just Dracula, because that was what they always wanted to do. So let's just do that. Count Orlok and Thomas and Ellen instead of Jonathan and Lucy.
My hot take is that those names are cooler. I like Orlok.
No, Orlok is a cool name, but the character's name is Dracula.
I know that it's not. I know that the story is exactly the same.
Yeah.
But for me, Nosferatu and Dracula are different.
Which is crazy. They're not. They're the same.
But I understand. It's the same story. It's a much more pared down version of the same story.
Yes.
And cleaner somehow.
It's very straightforward.
The specific way that he looks, which I know that there's nothing in that Dracula can look the same way. He can also look gross.
Yes.
I'm not saying that this is the one that looks gross and Dracula is like a good looking guy. That's just a creation of some of the movies. But I don't know. They've just always been very separate in my mind.
I get that, which is why when Robert Eggers said, I want to make a Dracula movie, he wasn't saying I want to make a Dracula movie. He was saying I want to remake Nosferatu.
Yes, specifically.
But Ian, you didn't get to participate in that episode.
No.
What'd you think of Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror from 1922?
I had seen it before. Holy crap, it's still everything you said. It's beautiful. The images from it are unbelievable, things that you don't understand how they pulled off. It's creepy. It's incredible. There's a lot of things that I learned from re-listening to the Adapt or Perish Dracula episode. I think I accidentally watched one of the bad versions of this. The dialogue cards used Dracula and stuff. But when you said that, I was like, wait a second, isn't that what my version did? So I probably watched like one of those ones.
Just so everybody knows, if you want to watch the original Nosferatu, if you rent it, you can get a really high quality version that has really good music and still has the original colors from it, and still has the original title cards, obviously translated into English, but still has with the original character names.
But maybe there's some less quality ones out there.
Right. And then the Herzog one, there's also a thing with that too, but go on.
Yeah, with the Herzog one, you mentioned in the Dracula episode, they basically did two. They did one with German language audio and one with English, and I found out about those two ones when I was re-listening to the Dracula episode after I'd watched it, and I was like, oh, there's a German language one. I probably should have watched that one, because the English language one, while not like terrible or anything, is the dialogue's just more stilted. It's a little awkward.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure I watched the bad version of that too.
Yeah, I've gone back and rewatched scenes from it in English since we recorded that, and my opinion has not changed and has in fact gotten stronger.
In regards to the Herzog one, the Klaus Kinski one, I liked it. I'm not sure I liked it as much as you did. That might have been because I watched the English language one.
I mean, maybe.
But who knows? But I really enjoyed a ton of it. I liked that this version of he's Dracula in it, but this version of Orlok.
That's insane. What you just said is crazy. This version of Orlok, it's Dracula.
He's different and cool. This is the closest one where you're like, he's like almost kind of a good guy. Like, he's not, but I just mean like you empathize with him more. It's because, he has these very Herzog-like existential thoughts.
I believe the word we used for Klaus Kinski's version of the Count was pitiable.
Yes.
Like probably more so than any other version of Dracula.
So yeah, I don't think I like it as much as the original, but it's still good and fun and creepy. I liked that quite a bit.
Well, you know who else likes those two movies? The creators of the 2000 film Shadow of the Vampire.
Right.
Did you see it?
I did back when it came out. Yeah.
I was disappointed.
Yeah, me too.
Now, what we all know is that Max Schreck, who portrayed Count Orlok, was not a vampire. But what Shadow of the Vampire presupposes is maybe he was.
Yeah, it's a really fun concept. But yeah, I haven't rewatched it since, forever ago when it came out. But I remember also being very disappointed with the end result.
It did have really good casting because cast as Max Schreck as Count Orlok was Willem Dafoe.
And he looks great.
Oh, it looks fantastic. He's perfect for it.
Yeah.
Guy belongs in a Dracula movie. By the way, friend of the pod.
Ooh, congratulations, Mr. Dafoe.
So someone who also loved the original Nosferatu and many Dracula movies is Robert Eggers.
Yeah.
He's risen very quickly. So just to recap for everybody, he wrote and directed The Witch in 2015, then The Lighthouse in 2019, The Northman in 2022, which we covered when we did Hamlet, and now Nosferatu. So this guy's like, he basically can do whatever he wants now at this point. And everyone, he wants to work with people, they want to work with him, and he's got very specific ideas. His movies are very, very meticulous and very intense.
Especially meticulous when coming to like historical accuracy of periods depicted in terms of architecture, fashion, language, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Other than, including vampires,
Right. Well, it's funny. So I was watching an interview that Willem Dafoe was giving about The Lighthouse, which was a movie I really enjoyed. But he was talking about how he and Robert Eggers came up with the voice that he did in that movie. And he basically said, because Robert Eggers is crazy for research. And so they went down so many rabbit holes trying to figure out what authentic accent they could bring to it. But eventually Robert Eggers was like, do that voice that you do. And he did like a pirate voice. And they were like, yeah, that's it. That's the voice you're going to do for it. So he wanted to make Nosferatu, and it was in development for a really long time. Eventually, the cast we've landed on is Lily-Rose Depp as Ellen Hutter.
Yep.
So what he's done is he's made Nosferatu, and he has said, yeah, I know Werner Herzog went back to the original names from the book, but the names from the first Nosferatu are better. So I'm going to go back to that one, which is a crazy thing. And why would anyone think that?
I think it's a good decision.
Why would anyone think that? Crazy. So she plays Ellen, who is basically Mina, who was named Lucy in the Werner Herzog one. It's also I hate it. Like
I know.
I was so excited to do a follow-up to the Dracula episode, but this was something I didn't expect, is that we'd have to get caught up in like what character names are. It's
Well,
so
you know what,
frustrating.
buddy? We don't have to anymore. That's all behind us. Now we're just talking about this one.
Oh, I just need to look forward. And her husband Thomas, who is Jonathan Harker, and that's Nicholas Hoult. He's the one who goes to Transylvania. There's also Orlok, because you can't have a vampire movie without a vampire. And that's Bill Skarsgård.
Yep.
Under a ton of makeup and a mustache. A book-accurate mustache, by the way.
Oh, is it in the book?
Of course it's in the book.
I didn't realize that.
Dracula has a mustache, and no one ever does it, because everyone's a coward.
Well, I mean, I think that what Eggers has said, this is all ties into all, obviously I didn't realize it was in the book. So that's obviously another big reason that he did it. This is all part of his historical accuracy thing, in that he says, if you look at any historical documents about that period of time and any of the cultures in the Carpathian Mountain region, you had a mustache if you were a man of means and royalty in that time and place. So it all comes together.
Bill Skarsgård did so much work for this movie. Total physical transformation. His voice is totally different.
The vocal thing in this is what kills me the most.
Incredibly effective. But then Eggers went off the rails in terms of creating all these characters.
Okay.
Because he basically put back a bunch of characters from Dracula.
Okay.
For example, Aaron Taylor Johnson plays Friedrich Harding, who's basically Arthur Holmwood.
Yeah.
And there's his wife, Anna, played by Emma Corrin. And she's basically Lucy Westenra in that she is a woman who is not the main woman who dies first. Emma Corrin, by the way, they're fantastic in this.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it. The quick version for me is everybody's good in this movie.
Yes, I think everyone does a very good job.
Ralph Ineson plays Dr. Wilhelm Sievers, who's basically Dr. Seward. This character is kind of in the other Nosferatus, but he's Van Helsing.
Yeah. And
he's a skeptic and doesn't believe any of the stuff that's going on, which is a ballsy move. And then there's Herr Nock, and this is Simon McBurney. He's from the original because he's basically Renfield.
Right.
There was no Van Helsing character in either of the previous Nosferatus. There wasn't this like experienced older guy who knew about the occult and knew about vampires and knew how to kill them and came in to help everybody. Eggers was like, well, no, I'm putting him back in. And also I'm going to cast my friend Willem. And I remember my experience in the theater very recently seeing this and thinking, I'm kind of against Van Helsing being, Willem Dafoe's great.
The first scene that he's in when they come get him at his weird little apartment.
Yeah.
But when he's like kind of in a trance with what he's trying to do and he doesn't understand who it is that's come to visit him. Ineson is like standing next to his chair and he's like, he comes out of the trance and he's like, oh, my boy, how are you? And like hugs him and stuff. It's just so funny. It's so good.
So funny. But obviously also dramatic and intense and all of the different things that Willem Dafoe can do. So Eggers kind of went back and said, I want to do Nosferatu, but I want to put more Dracula back in Nosferatu.
But I also want to keep a lot of it out, like the names.
I don't know. I feel like the quick version is, I think this movie has a lot going for it. Skarsgård is a monster with a mustache. Points for both. He's not sexy. He is a monster, as described in the book and as portrayed in the first two Nosferatus. He also has a mustache, which, as I've said, is fantastic. What he does with his voice, apart from the mustache, I feel like it's the thing I'm seeing people talk about the most with his performance. And yeah, I think valid, because it doesn't sound like him and it sounds incredible and it sounds exactly the way this character should sound.
It does that bonus thing of like, you hear him talk so much and so hypnotically, like well before you ever truly get a real look at him. And I just think
I also
that
agree
works.
That's a bad thing.
No, I think that works so well.
Nope.
So what do you think?
All right.
I like it.
I have 3 big problems with this movie.
Oh, okay. We're getting into the full. Okay.
I'm not sure what Eggers is doing here. Is he remaking Nosferatu, or is he remaking Dracula and using Nosferatu as like set decoration?
Or is he remaking Nosferatu and using Dracula as set decoration.
No, because that's the thing. He's using Dracula as the plot. Like Dracula is the bones of it. He's just like for me, the biggest thing is what he did with character names. Because I feel like when Herzog remade it, he was embracing aspects of the story from the 1922 version, but saying, you know what? There's some superficial stuff that we can embrace and we'll still make it effective. And one of the things is that it's a Dracula story. So it's Dracula. I think he's keeping the really basic core of Nosferatu, but putting the superficial stuff like the character names on top of it. I feel like Eggers is doing the complete opposite. He wants it to be Nosferatu, and he's using imagery from Nosferatu, but at its heart, it's a Dracula story. Mm-hmm. The fact that he put Van Helsing in it for me is a really big kind of giveaway, that he just wanted to make Dracula. It just feels kind of superficial as a remake of Nosferatu.
Okay. I think that's a legit criticism. For me, I think I don't mind the two things like remixed, but I get what you're saying.
So I feel like this is important for me to say because I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Mm-hmm. I am pro Nosferatu 2024.
I know you are.
But I think there's a deeper problem with bringing Van Helsing into it.
What's that?
One of the things that makes the Herzog version so good is that it gave so much agency to the Ellen character, to the Mina character. Mm-hmm. She was the only one saying there's something bad happening, and no one believed her. She was the only one who said, like, I got to take this shit in my own hands and I got to take care of it. By bringing Van Helsing in, you're reducing her agency because now she's a little more passive in this version, and Van Helsing is the one doing the Van Helsing part. And I feel like that was the thing that was the most revolutionary part of 22 and 79. And I feel like Eggers is kind of doing away with that, which is weird because I hear so much in this one from people about how much agency Ellen has.
Yeah.
But I feel like Eggers took away a lot of it by putting Van Helsing into it.
I agree that it took away. I just don't think it took away a lot. I think it took away a little.
How can I argue with a reasonable thing like that? Don't be reasonable.
I think that, I think he kind of did best of both worlds in that regard, in that he brought Van Helsing in, but he brought him in so relatively late, not so much in the story, but relatively late to her. She was saying that no one was believing her, trying to tell, and everyone was doing the wrong thing and tying her to beds and giving her ether and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does take away that she did not break out of that situation herself. In this movie, Van Helsing has to come in and be like, untie this woman from the bed immediately, you know. But then I like that she keeps more of it than you would expect by, it's kind of her that realizes that she has to sacrifice herself to save the day. It's not like Van Helsing is like tells her that that's what she has to do. They agree on it together.
Yeah. One thing I just want to make clear for people who haven't seen the new one thing that Eggers really doubles down on in this one is that she has a long, like a prior relationship with Orlok. Like he had come to her on the spiritual plane years before the movie started. He's been victimizing her across the ethereal plane for years now.
Yeah.
Another thing, problem number 2. And this is the reason I was disagreeing with you before. The 2 previous Nosferatus were defined by how much they didn't use jump scares and by how much they didn't hide the vampire from you. Uh-huh. That was the thing that was so important in those movies and made them so special. When Thomas, whatever his name is, gets to the castle, there is Dracula. And the audience sees him. Mm-hmm. And like the most terrifying scenes in the movie are the ones where Orlok is just standing there, either standing there or walking slowly towards the camera. Those are the terrifying things. It's other horror movies that do the trope of not showing it. Mm-hmm. And because that's not invalid. I don't think that's an invalid way of doing scary. And I think you can do that in Dracula. Mm-hmm. I just feel like if you are going to say, I'm remaking Nosferatu, that's an aspect of it. I'm not going to say you can't do Nosferatu if you're not willing to also do that, because obviously that's not true, because he did make Nosferatu and he didn't do that. But it makes me a little sad that he didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the case when I like something a little too significantly more than you. I get what you're saying, but I just liked it anyway. You know? Yeah. I see what you mean, but I liked maybe that's just because I'm kind of wired for that more delayed reveal of the monster thing, but I liked it. And I like how you keep seeing him eventually, but you're right. Like, even after you see him in the coffin, in the first time you really see the full him, then you kind of go back to not seeing him entirely for then even more of the movie. And then, and you're seeing him pretty in full by the end, but I didn't have a problem with it.
That whole first scene where you first meet Orlok and he's in shadow the entire time and you just hear his voice, like, it's absolutely effective, as all Robert Eggers stuff is. It's very well done. It's good. The craft is there. My problem is Nosferatu's big. If you're going to do it, there are certain things I want to see as a viewer.
Gotcha.
I guess. And then just my third problem with this whole thing, and this kind of goes into a bigger thing, is that, like, this doesn't really add much to the canon. 1922 was definitive in so many ways. Definitive not just for Dracula on screen, but also, movies on screen. 1979 was Herzog being Herzog, and it was aggressive in how direct it was. Herzog created a vampire with Klaus Kinski who was pitiable and evoked addiction. This one, it's beautifully rendered. Every part of it is just immaculate. The performances, the makeup, everything technical about it. It's so well put together. But I struggle to find anything other than the mustache. I struggle to find anything in this that Eggers' version is doing that other people haven't already done before. Yeah.
What you're saying here is the one criticism that I knew you had going into this record. And so the first two that you just talked about, I was confused because I was like, I thought he was going to be talking about how it doesn't do enough different. But these two first criticisms are about how he's saying that it did something different in a way that he didn't think worked for Nosferatu specifically. But now I see what you're saying. I don't know. It's like, I think that the aesthetics are largely what this movie is about in a good way. There's the way to say that that's a criticism, but not from me usually. Sure, it doesn't add much to the... I was trying to think of a different way to say canon like you did, but that's the perfect way to say it. But I just think the visual and auditory artistry of this film is what stands out about it. But you're right.
Thank you. Moving on.
But you're right. The story doesn't go anywhere different, or at least we've been talking about differences from this to the Draculas, to the other Nosferatus, to the book. But ultimately, this is very close to the book and the classic Dracula thing. So you're right. It doesn't stand out of the pack in that regard. And I get how you would maybe not dig that as much.
Yeah. Like, I don't like or enjoy Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
But boy, it adds to the canon.
Yeah, it sure does.
Like, I can't argue that it doesn't. It's definitive in so many ways. It is like it in the life of Dracula as something in pop culture. I feel like Coppola's one is up there. I just really don't like it. And this one, I like a lot more than the Coppola one, but I think in a lot of ways it's playing it safe in a way that Coppola didn't.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways you're right. We'll see how this one, how it stands the test of time. Maybe it won't. I think it'll do pretty good.
I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I feel like this is a metaphor that I usually don't use on the show, which is talking about adaptations of like books into movies and TV shows, talking about those kind of things, comparing them to covers of songs.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is the one time that I'll use that to describe how I feel about something.
Okay.
Because, like, let's talk about covers for a second. Bob Dylan, there's that movie about him in theaters now.
Unfortunately, I do know. Go ahead.
He wrote All Along the Watchtower.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix covered it. And it was and so utterly changed it and so utterly put his mark on it that Dylan decided, especially after Jimi Hendrix died, that he'd basically just do Hendrix's version from that point on. This one's smaller, but like one of my favorites. Randy Newman wrote the song Mama Told Me Not to Come.
Yeah.
And Three Dog Night covered it. And they realized that he put the words in the chorus in the wrong place in the chorus. And they moved them. They literally moved the words to a different part of the music and turned it into like one of the greatest pop hooks ever. And Randy Newman has gone on record to say, like, I just left that. I didn't even know. I had no idea that what I did was wrong, but I didn't know that they fixed it.
That's
Trent
funny.
Reznor wrote Hurt.
Yeah.
And it's deeply personal. How could anybody cover a song so deeply personal? But like famously, Johnny Cash covered it and he redefined the song. And in a lot of ways, like in a lot of people's minds, he kind of took over ownership of the song.
Yeah.
And what they were doing is they were doing the thing and they were adapting it in a way where not only were they adapting it for their own unique talents, they were adapting it with a different context in all of them that added to it and made the song something more than it was before. Whether it was making it more poppy or whether it was making it more emotional, like they were still changing it. On the other hand, lots of artists cover songs that they love live. Have you ever been to a concert and a band starts doing a cover and you're like, oh my God, I love this band and I love this song. They love this song too. This is amazing. Do you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, I absolutely do. Yeah.
It's less about interpreting the song. It's more about celebrating the song. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful. And I love it when it happens. But it's a different kind of thing. It's a different type of cover. It lives differently. And I'll go back to Bob Dylan for a second. You know him. There's a movie about him right now. He wrote Like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones have performed that song for years. And they released a version of it on an album in 1995. Have you heard it before?
I think I probably have.
It's the best example I could come up with of Eggers doing Nosferatu.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. Like, technically, there's not a thing wrong with it. The Rolling Stones are one of the greatest bands of all time. They know how to perform music.
Yes.
They are good at it. But their version of the song is nothing new. But if you love the song and you love the Rolling Stones, oh, it's fantastic.
Right.
And I feel that way about Eggers doing Nosferatu. Like, if you love Eggers and you love Nosferatu, it's just really cool to go to the theater and watch a filmmaker you love do their version of a property that you love. And he's born to do it. Like, he's ready to do this material. I just really feel like 20 years from now, his version of Nosferatu is going to be largely forgotten. I just am not sure what Eggers is doing.
Gotcha. I'm not going to lie to you, man. I had these, like, your cover song take on this was another thing that you had mentioned to me before this record, just in passing.
By the way, I am closing the box on that metaphor. I'm not using that anymore ever again.
Well, this is great because basically I was like sat down with ammunition because this was still like, because along with the other thing based on what you said that I had thought, like, I thought you were definitely going on just a pure, this movie doesn't change enough. I was here ready with this, like, well, those are songs, Jeremy, and film is not just an audio medium, and like, I had all this stuff. But now that you have actually said the full breadth of what you mean, I'm like, yeah. I mean, what I was going to say doesn't work with what you're going to say at all. And like, no, I mean, I get what you're saying. I still like the movie more than you, but and I think it probably will stand more of a test of time, but. But so anyway, I was like amped, and then I was just like, oh,
sorry.
No, you should be proud.
I'm proud.
Your argument was not as obtuse as I was maybe going to assume that it was going to be. So good on you.
I mean, I'm sorry that my basic view of this movie is it's good.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just one of the ones where, like, I feel like I went into it thinking that we were way farther apart, but actually we're pretty close, you know.
Can I end with my favorite bit of behind-the-scenes stuff that I learned about this movie?
Of course.
Eggers was talking about writing it. He was doing an interview, and he was asked the question, like, what versions of Dracula inspired you? And he's like, all of them. I watched all of them while I was writing it because I wanted to really get into it. And he was like, obviously the first Nosferatu and the Werner Herzog one and Todd Browning, the Bela Lugosi version. But the one that surprised him the most with how impactful it was to his writing process was Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Nice.
His reason was perfect because he was basically like, Mel Brooks figured out everything that's stupid with the story.
So you can just cut that stuff out.
Make sure that stuff works and you're good.
That's amazing.
Anyway, quadrants, super, super quick. Do you think Robert Eggers cared about the source material? And honestly, whether you're talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula or Nosferatu or all of it, do you think he cared?
An amazing amount.
Is it successful?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this has been Adapter Parish. You can always find us online at adapterparishcast.com. There you'll find our social links, contact information, show notes for this and every episode, and more. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with The Time Machine.